On the evening of June 9, 2026, Caitlin Clark buried a 31-foot three-pointer with 1.2 seconds remaining to give the Indiana Fever a 78-76 victory over the Washington Mystics. She received a cross-court inbound pass from Sophie Cunningham, barely eluding defender Courthoop McMahon before the ball went through the net. For roughly 12 hours, the moment belonged entirely to Clark. Then Cunningham posted an image to Instagram and the story changed shape. The post was an AI-generated cartoon depicting Cunningham, Clark, and head coach Stephanie White sitting together in the locker room after the game winner, with captions reading, "Didn't follow the plan and won anyway." Within hours, the image had been shared across social media platforms at a scale that far exceeded the original game coverage. The dominant interpretation among fans was literal, that Cunningham had improvised the inbound pass, that Clark had not been the intended recipient, and that the play had succeeded in spite of, not because of, White's direction. The Indiana Fever entered the 2026 season as one of the WNBA's title favorites, following a 24-20 record and a semifinal appearance in 2025. Against that expectation, a 6-5 start through 11 games had already made the team a source of ongoing media scrutiny. The Cunningham post arrived into that context like a lit match dropped into dry wood. What made the moment ignite so quickly was not just the content of the image itself, but everything that had already been accumulating around this team since the season began. The Fever had provided repeated entry points for critics over the prior 2 weeks. A blowout loss, a viral sideline exchange between Clark and White, a post-game media absence from Clark after one defeat, and a league warning over injury reporting procedures. Cunningham's post, however casual in intent, became the organizing frame for all of it. The original option on the final inbound play appears to have been to get the ball to Kelsey Mitchell. That detail, confirmed indirectly through multiple accounts, became the focus of the immediate post-game debate. Lexi Hull addressed the play in an interview after the game, saying, "We were trying to draw a foul there. I think Caitlin's a great basketball player. She made a read. I can't say that's exactly what we drew up, but it worked." Hull's phrasing was careful but unambiguous. The play, as executed, was not the play Stephanie White had designed. The Mystics' defense got mixed up on the sequence, and Courthoop McMahon attempted to jump the pass, which is how Clark got so open, and may account for what appeared to be the improvised nature of the game winner. In other words, the deviation from the set play was less a deliberate act of defiance and more a real-time read made possible by a defensive breakdown. That distinction mattered for how the play should be understood. It was not widely reported in that framing. Only a few observers recognized that Cunningham's post was intended as a joke. The veteran guard eventually had to address the matter directly on social media. On June 10, she wrote on X, "You guys read too much into things. That's the exact play our coach drew up and we executed it perfectly." The capitalization was deliberate, the denial was categorical. Cunningham was not walking back a half statement or softening a previous position. She was asserting that the entire premise of the viral conversation had been wrong. By the time Cunningham offered her correction, however, fans had already concluded she was reversing a prior admission, pointing to Hull's post-game comments as evidence that her denial contradicted the record. The correction did not close the debate. In the environment surrounding the 2026 Indiana Fever, it reopened it. To understand why a lighthearted meme from a role player became a 48-hour news cycle, it is necessary to trace the sequence of events that preceded it. The Cunningham post did not create the narrative around this team's dysfunction. It inherited one that had been building since late May. The first major incident came on May 30, during a road loss to the expansion Portland Fire. With 6:30 left in the first quarter, White subbed out Clark, Hull, and Aaliyah Boston. Indiana was leading at the time. By the end of the quarter, Portland had taken a 29-15 lead. The scale of the collapse in that stretch, a 14-point swing in roughly 6 minutes, was striking on its own. The circumstances made it more so. The team that scored 29 first-quarter points was an expansion franchise in its inaugural season. White said after the game that she was simply being proactive in managing her stars' workload and that the substitutions were nothing out of the ordinary. That explanation did not resonate with a fan base that had watched a competitive game unravel immediately following Clark's removal. The rotation decision was scrutinized intensely, and the debate had barely settled when a second piece of footage emerged from the same game. A fan-captured video appeared to show an animated exchange between Clark and White during a timeout. Clark played just 22 minutes in the loss after getting into foul trouble, finishing with 5 fouls and 6 points. She was subbed out following the disagreement with White, and the video went viral. Hall of Fame analyst appearing on NBC Sports that week weighed in on the moment. Sue Bird said, "This isn't the first time we've seen this. It doesn't have some deeper meaning to it. I've had moments like that with coaches." Bird's read was measured. The social media environment's read was not. Clark addressed the media scrutiny directly in the days that followed. When asked how she had handled the online narratives about her and the Fever, she said, "I don't really know why we're still on this. We didn't blatantly sit there and talk about everything you guys were writing and what's in the media." It was a pointed response, communicating genuine frustration, not with White, but with the frame that had been constructed around a routine sideline exchange. Around the same period, Clark was absent from a post-game press conference following a loss to the Golden State Valkyries. Initial reports suggested she had declined to speak with the media. Fever reporter Robin Lundberg later clarified the situation. Clark had not been selected as one of the two players made available that evening, a standard rotation procedure, though the team should have made her available upon media request per league policy. The real explanation was administrative. It had nothing to do with Clark's willingness to face reporters. The initial framing, as is common in these cycles, had already circulated widely before the correction arrived. The Fever were also issued a warning by the league after they failed to notify officials that Clark would not play in a Wednesday home game, when she was scratched due to back soreness that emerged the morning of the contest. The league's injury reporting policy requires advance notification, and Indiana's handling of Clark's availability that day did not meet that standard. It was a procedural violation, and the warning was issued accordingly. Within the ongoing narrative about the organization's management, it became something more, further evidence, in the view of critics, of an operation that was not running cleanly. Stephanie White had also been a visible presence in public controversy earlier in the season. She drew a league fine for remarks made about officiating following a game in May. She had said, "I think it's pretty egregious what's been happening to us the last 4 games, a -31 free throw discrepancy, and I might be able to understand it if we were just chucking threes. But we're not. We're attacking the rim, and the disrespect right now for our team has been pretty unbelievable." The comments were specific and pointed. The fine followed. When asked about officiating again in a subsequent post-game session, White acknowledged the fine and declined to elaborate further. These incidents, the Portland loss, the sideline exchange, the post-game absence, the league warning, the officiating fine, form the backdrop against which the Cunningham meme landed. None of them individually constituted a crisis. Taken together and filtered through a social media environment primed for conflict, they composed a portrait of a team whose internal dynamics were under strain. The Indiana Fever stood at 6-5 through 11 games, with a net rating of 3.6, performing roughly as a median WNBA team by most statistical measures, well below expectations for a franchise that reached the semifinals in 2025 and entered 2026 with a healthy Clark. Contributing factors to the uneven start included reintegrating Clark into the rotation after her injury-shortened 2025 season, replacing Natasha Howard at the 4 with Monique Billings and Misha Hines-Allen, and incorporating rookie point guard Raven Johnson. These are the kinds of roster transitions that take time. They are also the kinds of explanations that carry less weight in a sports media environment preoccupied with a different kind of story. Cunningham had addressed the team's rocky stretch before the Mystics game, using the phrase "ickiness" to describe what the group was going through. She added, "I think I'd much rather be going through the trenches right now than in September and October." That framing, early season turbulence as a manageable process, was a reasonable assessment. It was also, inadvertently, an acknowledgement that something was in fact difficult. In the hands of a media cycle looking for confirmation, the word trenches carried more weight than Cunningham likely intended. What is notable about the Cunningham meme episode, examined in full, is how effectively it illustrated the distance between the event itself and the way it was processed. The play worked. Clark made the shot. The Fever won the game they desperately needed after a dispiriting stretch. White said afterward, "I don't know the noise is ever going to be quiet. This is what Caitlin does. She makes big shots and she has big moments. When you have a player like her, it's very easy for people to take it for granted. Sometimes we take generational talent for granted. What she did was incredible for us. She's going to have many more moments like that. I know she is. We needed this one tonight." The coach's remarks were generous and direct. They did not receive the same level of attention as the cartoon, one fan posted on X in the immediate aftermath of Cunningham's original Instagram reveal. "Nah, any and all BS is acceptable over there. That's the culture they building." The comment was widely circulated as representative of a broader sentiment, that the meme was evidence of organizational dysfunction, that it confirmed something already suspected. The subsequent clarification from Cunningham, and the broader context of how the final play actually unfolded, did not generate comparable engagement. This is the structure of the information environment surrounding this team, and it is worth examining without exaggeration. There are legitimate questions about Indiana's early season performance. The record was below expectation. The coaching decisions during the Portland loss produced a result that was difficult to defend analytically. The sideline exchange between Clark and White, whatever its actual meaning, was visible to anyone with a phone and a social media account, and it happened in a professional setting with competitive consequences. The organizational handling of Clark's injury availability, however minor, was a real procedural failure that the league formally acknowledged. These are real issues. The commentary they generate, however, routinely overwhelms them. One journalist who spent the week with the team described the gap between Indiana's measurable performance and the volume of criticism directed at them as a reality distortion field. A situation in which the narrative around the team took on its own momentum, independent of what was actually happening on the court. That framing is useful not because it dismisses the criticism, but because it identifies the mechanism by which a team sitting at 6-5 in mid-June, with a generational player finally healthy and available, comes to be discussed primarily in terms of its fragmentation. Sophie Cunningham occupies an interesting position within this dynamic. She has over 1.3 million Instagram followers, having added roughly 600,000 of them since a confrontation she initiated in defense of Clark during the 2025 season. Much of that growth is attributable to her proximity to Clark. Cunningham is aware of this and has discussed it publicly. Her social media presence is large enough that a casual post, an AI-generated image, and a two-line caption reaches an audience of millions within hours. That is not a trivial condition for a reserve player to operate under. It creates a responsibility for precision that most WNBA bench contributors have never had to navigate. Cunningham's post was clearly humorous in intent. Clark's response in the comment section, "Love you, Soph," indicated she received it as such. The two players have a well-established dynamic of public banter, documented across multiple interviews and social media exchanges dating back to their first season together. The image was not a leak. It was not a whistleblowing moment. It was a joke about a basketball play posted by someone who had just made the decisive pass in a win her team badly needed. The fact that it was processed as a credible organizational disclosure says more about the appetite for a particular story than about anything Cunningham actually revealed. Cunningham's decision to defend White publicly, her insistence in the clarifying post that the play was executed exactly as designed, reflects something worth noting about the internal dynamic on this team. That defense came with context, a player who understood the environment she was operating in, who recognized that her joke had produced unintended consequences, and who chose to intervene directly rather than allow the interpretation to stand. That is not the behavior of someone who has lost confidence in her coaching staff. It is the behavior of someone managing a situation that got away from her. The Indiana Fever are not a team in crisis. They are a team navigating a transitional season, integrating personnel changes, and working through a competitive WNBA field that is significantly stronger than it was 2 years prior. Kelsey Mitchell has been scoring efficiently throughout the year. Aaliyah Boston has incorporated a three-point shot at a rate that was not previously expected, connecting at 41.7% on 2.4 attempts per game. Those are developments that matter for how the team's ceiling should be assessed. They are not the kind of facts that generate engagement relative to a cartoon posted to Instagram. Caitlin Clark walked out of the Care First Arena in Washington, having made one of the more consequential shots of the WNBA season to date. A 31-foot game winner, often improvised inbound read with 1.2 seconds left in a game her team needed. The play itself, regardless of what was drawn up, regardless of who it was originally designed for, regardless of what any meme said afterward, was the product of a player reading a defense in real time and making a decision under extreme competitive pressure that most players at any level are not equipped to make. That is the element of the story that the meme cycle consumed, but did not illuminate. Whatever happened in the final possession against the Mystics, and whatever the Fever's early season navigation looks like behind closed doors, the outcome was Clark with the ball and the Fever with the lead. The cartoon got 36 hours of coverage. The shot itself deserved more.